nerd.
And let me make sure I'm unmuted. There we go. You probably can hear me now. Welcome to our The Last of Us recap show. My name is Jamie with Black Girl Nerds, and we have a large team with us today, including special guests, to talk about episode 3 of The Last of Us. So I am joined here with Ryan, Giandra, Angelica, and our guest Josh is back. Thank you guys for coming back.
Yay!
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, woo, man, episode 3. What a
Jesus.
trip.
Jesus.
Before we even get started talking about the episode, for those that are just joining us, if this is your first time checking out our live stream podcast, we do these every week. I will say next week there will not be a live show, so I do apologize in advance. There's traveling going on next week, so we're not able to do a live show, but we will be back the following Sunday to do our recap. But please do all of the things. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that notification bell. We are currently streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So if you haven't done so already, please follow us on all of those platforms. And listen, this is a two-way conversation. I know there's all of us here that's going to give our thoughts and opinions about this episode, but please, by all means, if you guys have something to say, you want to add, join us in the chat. I'll bring up your comments on the live stream, and happy to have you here. And if you are sitting here right now listening to us and you're on YouTube, please hit the like button. It kind of helps us a little bit in the algorithm, so we really appreciate you doing that. All right, so episode 3 of The Last of Us. I'm just going to go right in and then do the setup for the first scene, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it. We don't get a cold open on this episode, unlike the first two, so that was a little different. We went straight to show titles. But then we see Joel. He's stacking up a pile of rocks near a bubbling brook. It's about 10 miles west of Boston. And Ellie is trying to break the ice, have a conversation with Joel. He's giving her the silent treatment. So again, we haven't had a bond yet between these two. And Ellie tells Joel not to blame her for Tess's death. And he nods. So Ellie is still trying to get over the Tess situation. And they proceed to take a 5-hour hike through the woods. They approach an abandoned gas station and an area called Cumberland Farms. Gamers are pretty familiar with that name. And then Ellie sees an arcade and a game, Mortal Kombat, which I used to play for hours on end back in the day. And she talks about the character Melina. And this is a reference that you just want to keep in mind, the Mortal Kombat in the arcade game. That's all I'll say with that. Ellie then looks around the old building and she says, this is the funniest line here. She says, "Is there anything bad in here?" To which Joel says, "Just you." Yeah. So that was a cute moment. So I'm going to stop here, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are about the discourse between Ellie and Joel at this stage of their relationship. So we'll just go in order as I see people. So we'll start with Ryan, Giandra, Josh, and then Angelica.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I love the banter between Ellie and Joel because I like that she will not give him a break because he just kind of wants to hide from everything from his past and, just kind of make it through. He's like, I'm just existing. I've lost a lot. I don't want to deal with this. And Ellie's like, nah, you're not getting off that easy. Like she's asking 20 questions. She's not letting up. She's a kid, right? Like she's so curious. She was born in a time period where there's not, there's so many things that she hasn't experienced and she wants to know about them. And she's not letting them off. She's like, I know you're mad at me, but it's not my fault. And it's me and you. So you better get it together. And I love it.
What I like that even, with that youth and that sort of precociousness, I used to hate that word, but that's really kind of the kind of kid she is. She, like a lot of kids in this era, have this kind of heightened emotional intelligence or ability to comprehend, even if she doesn't have the maturity to filter. Maybe that's a good thing for their pairing that she doesn't. And I like that too, that she doesn't give him a break because, nobody asked for all this. everybody is equally a victim of these circumstances. So, we all have choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's been said so far. I mean, I feel like she's definitely living in the the paradox of being a teenager. Because teenagers will come in hard with their asserted truths, like she did. She's like, "Psh, I went to school," and then every time she doesn't know something, he's like, "I thought you went to school," and she just doesn't even address it. She's like, "Well, my school wasn't the best. We didn't learn everything," which was his point in the beginning. He's like, "You don't know everything just because you went to school." So I love that she's a teenager and he is an exasperated older man dealing with a teenager. It feels completely accurate to me.
Yeah, it was it's your typical disgruntled older man coupled with a teenager on the road buddy adventure. Like reminds me of the Hound and Arya kind of going at it. He doesn't really like kids. He's grumpy. He just wants to get through it. And eventually, she wins him over. So of course we know at some point Ellie's going to win him over. But right now he's putting up a hard front. Or like Donkey and Shrek. It's just I love a good buddy road comedy. So that's my takeaway.
I love the Arya and the Hound comparison. That's actually pretty accurate. Yeah, because at the beginning there was that antagonism between them two, and then they grew to, become like buddies, two peas in a pod. So that's great analogy. Really quick, just a shout out in the comments. Rose Evergreen, thank you. Hi, Rose Evergreen. By the way, it puts on a wonderful drag show. Saw Rose perform over at TwitchCon, so follow Rose Evergreen on Twitch if you want to see some really cool content coming from her channel. And then Jesse says, I'm still pretty shocked Bill is dead. Didn't he live out longer in the game? Beautiful episode nonetheless. Yes, we don't know what Bill's, I guess, what his journey looks like in the game, because he's still kind of a recluse, and I think he's pretty much still alive, but we don't know if he's dead or if he's alive. But yeah, in the game, it was totally different, the way his journey ends. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in this episode, but it absolutely was a beautiful episode. To the windows, to the wall. Rose is lit. I love it. Okay, so then on to the next scene. Ellie sees an infected that is trapped under a pile of rubble. She takes out a knife and cuts its forehead open and then stabs it. Then there's this silence, and Joel is concerned and he calls out for Ellie, to which Ellie comes out with a box of tampons. So all is good there. And Joel and Ellie come across a plane wreckage later on in the scene, and Ellie is fascinated by Joel having flight experience. Keep in mind, Ellie has never been on a plane. She's been sheltered and born and raised in the QZ. So, she's lived a pretty sheltered life. So this is all new to her. Joel has a conversation with Ellie, and then he talks about how the infection spreads. So we get a little bit more backstory about the origins of the cordyceps, that they got into grain, flour, and sugar, and that items like bread, cereal, and pancake mix. Thought that was interesting that he brought up pancake mix, because pancakes was referenced in the first episode, were sold all over the world. And if you eat enough of it, you will get infected. Friday night, September 26, 2003, is the day that Joel mentions of the outbreak. And he says that by Monday, everything was gone. So Joel doesn't want Ellie to see the wreckage, as well as he's having this discussion and they're getting closer and closer towards the crash plane and the wreckage. He doesn't want her to see it. And being the stubborn girl that she is, Ellie is like, I'm even more intrigued. When you tell me no, I want to do it even more. So she goes towards it, and then she sees bones and skulls of the dead everywhere. Joel then tells Ellie that the soldiers had evacuated the towns and were told that some of the people that were going to the QZ, that there wasn't enough room for them. So he sort of trails off as he's explaining this. And then it dawns on Ellie that these people were not sick. And we figure out that they were just executed to contain the infection, since there was since there was no room for them and the dead cannot be infected. So kind of sad. But I'll stop there and just want to know, what your thoughts were about this breakdown of the infection and how the military handled the containment.
Yeah, I think going back to with Ellie just finding the clicker or the infected down into the little basement. I thought that was just like it was kind of like a little gangster part on her as well because I'm thinking if I see it, I'm getting out of there. Like even though it's under some bricks and stuff like that, but it's like it's making the noise. She goes up, it's like she has like a little science experiment and she's kind of cutting it, she just kind of pokes it. And I'm like, now we get to see her like mentality as she continues this show when she approaches stuff like that, that hardness as a little kid that she has. But she's gonna need that for this journey for her to be her and Joel. Joel's not gonna call to her and she's gonna see stuff that she doesn't want to know, or little or younger people shouldn't have to see. And so it's interesting to see her take on her first being up close in person with this infected, with one of the clickers. And then, as far as it goes, as a story being told, and I was like, Ellie always pushing when Joel's like, no, you don't want to see that, you don't want to know what's going on. But she's curious. Like Jay Z. Wow, like Jamie said, I'm trying to
99
combine
problems. They
Jamie
got
and the
99 problems for
QC.
real.
She do got 99 problems though. There you go. So I'm trying me trying to combine Jamie and the QC. Good lord, it's late. But anyway, her talking about her getting to know about the QC and those little details. And yeah, it's sad. I mean, the government, when they couldn't figure out what to do, and there was so many infected people, and you see what happened with Joel and his daughter, they just started taking out people. And it was just like, to your defense, you're like, if they're in the small town, why can't they just be sections off in that little town and just be by themselves? But they were like, the only way, like Joel said, dead people can't get infected. So that was their mentality of going through these different sections, these different areas. And it's sad to see, like you saw little bones and stuff. And I was like, oh God, now they got to break us down more into the episode. So yeah, it's curious to see just the tolerance between the both of them, like how Joel and Ellie handle seeing a lot of this dead and affected.
There were like three things that from that section that struck me. The first was I was surprised that Ellie stabbed homie in the head because although she's had exposure to a lot of death during this period in their history, she really hasn't had to do that. I get the impression. Like you said, she's been sheltered, she's lived in a community of people, she's special, she's gotten attacked, so she should have some type of fear factor. Maybe it's her coming into an understanding now fully that these people can't do anything to her, and so maybe it's given her a little bravery to venture close to the infected people. So I was just really surprised she was just so like, oh, good lord, are you that's the signs of serial killing. And then Joel, very much so, we understand that he's had a lot of loss and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, but he is really, truly a glass half empty person. There is no light within him ever. They just suffered immense tragedy, but most people who have had some type of light in their life, even in the midst of tragedy, can still find some type of light in it, or maybe it's a full acceptance of their situation. I don't know. He has zero light in him, and it's very sad and tragic. And so it makes me appreciate those Ellie interactions a little bit more because I feel like no one's made him laugh like ever. That's the impression I get. Just so down. And then the last thing was with the when they give the backstory on that Holocaust section that they passed through, that they opened the scene on a black face. When he's telling her in the midst of the story that they slaughtered this town, the first person you see is a sister and her baby. And I thought, I love it. I love that it's being very transparent of what type of people were prioritized to go to the
Wow.
QZ, but just open it right on a sister and a child. We didn't make it, so clearly we didn't make it. And for whatever reason, I googled 226 2003. It didn't have no real semblance. I just found a whole bunch of stuff about the band Fish. So those were my three takeaways from this section. I thought it would be something like Superfly, but no, not really.
That was a lot. I will say, Ellie definitely had to be played by a white woman, because every black person would have been that Kiki moment from nope, nah, fam. And just took off. Like, are you walking closer to it? It was super gangster, super gangster. I was just like, yeah, nah. I'd have gone back and like, ain't nothing down there, bro. We good. We good. Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. But I do find it interesting that like she's not squeamish. She's not squeamish and she's not inept. And obviously, one of the things plaguing Joel is like the loss of his daughter in his actual arms. And he hasn't quite caught on yet that even with not wanting her to see the bodies, that Ellie, though curious and brash like his daughter was, isn't helpless and naive. She doesn't need the kind of protecting she doesn't really need protecting. She needs guidance and information, whereas his daughter needed like protecting. And you know, he hasn't really accepted that yet. And then the last thing that stuck out to me was when they're walking, he's explaining, and he I can't remember exactly how he says the line, but basically it's like the government failed to protect the people from a pandemic that could have been prevented. And just when he said that, I was like, oh, it felt like Hamilton, immigrants would get the job done, because he said that and it was just silence for like 10 seconds. I was like, oh, you just mic dropped on everybody right there. Okay. Okay. And then we kept going. But yeah, I think all of this is just obviously, like you said, we know they're gonna come around, but just I like that everything in this show with the characters is earned. Nothing is given to any character, no emotional evolution, nothing. Like every single thing, like they earn it every step of the way.
Facts.
Agreed. Well, I will say, watching the show, that tampon was a win. I know if I was in a post-apocalyptic world, fighting a box of tampons, yes. So props to
The hot
Ellie for
commodity.
that. Hot commodity. No pink tax there. I took away Ellie killing the infected. I know earlier she had a conversation with Joel and she asked him, did he ever feel bad for killing an infected, because at one point they were human, and he said sometimes, yes, I do. So I think she knows she's out here, she's exposed. This is an opportunity for her to see if she can do what Joel can do, right? So you know, she's in a protected environment. It's under bricks. It can't kill her. So I think she was experimenting and seeing, like, do I really have the guts to kill the infected, and will I feel bad after? And I don't think she did. So that was my takeaway. And I really don't have anything further to add. I think we've all touched on the bigger points, and like Chandra mentioned, I did feel away, you know, seeing a Black woman and a Black child being among those that were killed simply because there wasn't any room. So yeah, that's all I have to add.
Yeah, and one of our commenters, Michelle, says very haunting flashback of the sister and her baby, and seeing the remnants of her clothing mixed with the remains of bodies in the present. I feel like everything, and I think you said this, Josh, with the characters, but also with respect to the directors and the producers and the writers, that everything is intentional with this show. So yeah, that was a very haunting scene, but seeing that it was a Black woman and her Black daughter being seen in that way and just being discarded in that way really just spoke volumes. So yeah, it's eye-opening. So then our next scene, we move on to a flashback. We flash back to September 30th, 2003. This is actually 4 days after the outbreak. We see a man with a sophisticated surveillance setup, and he's armed with a gun, and he's hiding out underground away from the soldiers. So he knows something that we don't. He's armed with a rifle and wearing a gas mask. We see Bill, played by Nick Offerman, and he walks outside of his home looking for any soldiers or infected that's coming near his home, when we see him walking out with the gas mask on. And then he takes it off and he's kind of looking around to see, okay, is the coast clear? His entire neighborhood is completely evacuated. So he's the only one there in this whole entire neighborhood. And we notice right away that Bill is very, very resourceful. He goes to the gas station and he fills up gasoline in these big, huge barrels. He heads over to Home Depot and grabs a ton of supplies. And when the lights go out at Home Depot, he's like, oh, that was fast. He heads over to New Bedford Natural Gas and he grabs some generators. So he's got pretty much everything at his disposal that you need, like a survival kit in the post-apocalypse. He has a garden as well, and he grows vegetables. He's got chickens where he can have eggs, and he manages to find livestock. And we see him kill that well, we don't see him kill it, but we see it skinned. And he prepares that for dinner. So I'll stop here. I just want to know from you guys, like, how freaking cool is Bill? Number one. And what are your thoughts about how resourceful he is?
Yeah, Bill is awesome. I remember in the game, like just seeing how many traps and stuff he set, like how he was so ready for this. Because I'm thinking, who doesn't go to like one of the QC or who's not moving around, with the hunters? But he had like everything just set, and I love how they kept that for the show, where he was ready. He had the surveillance. He knew what stores to go to before everything got shut off. And the fact of in this show, what I think is so cool is you got to have the timing and you have to understand what's around you. Like you have to understand how you can use the tools and everything quickly around you. Like, what do you have in your tool set? If everything goes down, do I know how to get myself over here? Because there's no GPS. The cell phone service might be down from time to time. You got to kick it old school. And I like how Bill it's like no hesitation. He's like, okay, I got my gun. I'm watching in the surveillance. I know they're leaving. And just that one factor right there, the timing of if he would have got swept up into that group, he would have been taken out. Like just him watching and knowing, them coming in and grabbing people, and you may not make it to that zone, even though they're pretending like they're trying to save people. I think it's so cool to watch. But yeah, I just love the survival instinct that kicks in. Josh touched on this last episode, going back to like just the pandemic of COVID and how everything shut down. It was like, well, you better figure it out quick. Like you're working at home. This is what you have. And I like how each of these characters are put in a situation of, so this is what you have. How do you survive? Do you know to go to the stores right away and get all your resources because you're going to be the only one in this town? So yeah, shout out to Bill for like getting it together quick. Like he wasn't playing.
Mm-hmm. I loved it. Bill is my kindred spirit. First of all, I'm super into gardening. Anybody who follows me know I'm crazy about growing anything. So, I mean, I think I feel like in that kind of situation, I don't know about I would have been prepared with the bunker underground, but I definitely wouldn't have been going. I would have hit out too and hit the Home Depot and hit all that. Was brilliant. That was brilliant. That man had a whole town of things at his disposal and a garden and the soil. Like, we just saw some of the things that he had. Just the soil alone, I would have turned my neighbor's whole yard into a garden. I would have got it cracking then. Like everybody on the block would have had a garden in the backyard to sustain myself. But it just really makes me feel a way, like when I look at how things are happening in society. I'm not the super biggest conspiracy theorist, but I do have a healthy dose of it. And I'm looking at Bill like, let me bookmark this part of the show because I might want to, keep this in mind
Some
just
ideas.
for the future. When the toilet paper and all this stuff and the eggs. I just saw a story. Someone sent me an egg factory just burnt down today or in the last couple of days in the midst of an egg shortage.
Eggs is
Just
like $6 now. It's
eggs is
crazy.
like $137 for 12.
Exactly. Yep.
All of that stuff, or even with bees, there's been some places in the United States where they've been burning down honey, like where bees make honey and stuff.
Oh my
Let
God.
us all salute to Bill. Nick Offerman, you are a real one. I'm bookmarking that part of the show to watch periodically so I can get my mind together for the apocalypse. Because Bill is he knew what was up. I need to get my like technical knowledge up, but the gardening, I got us. I got it.
Yeah, Bill's a real one. I mean, so if they ever pull this episode down, we can take that as a warning that something bad's happening because they don't want us to be prepared. They don't want us to be able to study.
That part.
But yeah, nah, Bill was a real one. I was watching the whole thing. I was like, he made it look too easy. Like he just went. I was like, oh, okay. Like you really about this. Like you must have had some black friends back in the day because these are survival skills, exceptional. Yeah, I think everyone hit on it. The thing that made me laugh is that when he pulled up, he looked over and saw the wine shop. He's like, man, let me go ahead and give me a case of wine. And not to make it like over deep, but I do feel like that's something we learned too late during our own pandemic, is just the ability to take a step back and let yourself just like breathe and be human. Let yourself enjoy something. And obviously, well, that theme comes back later in the episode, but just that, like, yeah, everything's trash. I've hit the point where I've done everything that I can do today. There's nothing else to be done today. And so in this moment, I'm going to let myself enjoy this. And I think there's something like subtly awesome just about that.
Agreed. When he was making that meal and he was just like, I was like, yes, I need that plate. I need that plate, Bill. It looked good. Well, I like everyone else, I really enjoyed Bill. Part of the reason why, outside of his resourcefulness, the reason why Bill's alive is because he's deeply distrustful of the government. And I'm sure there's people like Bill in this world, and we think they're weird. But in reality, that's the person that you want to be with if there's an apocalypse. So now I'm gonna be nicer to my weird neighbor down the street that is an extreme couponer and has like all the stuff in his basement. I know whose house to go to if something happens. Yeah, I would love to be prepared like that. I think about zombie apocalypses way too often, and I just always be like, I'm just gonna take a pill and go to sleep and peace out. I can't deal with stress like that. It's either I'm gonna lock myself in my basement, or I'm just gonna take myself out and just spare myself the trauma. So, shout out, salute to Bill for making himself a little paradise amongst all the craziness.
Absolutely. Danielle says, loved how they diverted from the game. This episode gave us, the audience, a moment to breathe. We were able to go on a journey to the past and present. Bill is my kind of dude. And yes, there is a little bit of deviation from the game, and we'll talk about that more as we get towards the end of the episode. Bill is beyond prepared and skilled at surviving. Yes. And we definitely need to take notes on Bill's preparedness. Yes, I'm going to bookmark this episode as well. Raider X says, what's the song name? I don't know what you're referring to. So if you can be a little bit more specific with that question, I'm happy to answer it. Okay, so the next scene, we actually see an infected wanderer that comes onto Bill's property. But we see that Bill has his property booby trapped, and the death trap is or the infected is killed on sight. And then we fast forward to 4 years later, and Bill is still managing well on his own with all of his resources. An alarm goes off, and then he noticed that one of his traps were rigged. So he goes outside and he sees what was caught. An uninfected man is in a manhole created by Bill, and he tells this man that's in the hole, he tells Bill that he was on his way to Boston. He actually had a group of 10 people with him, but obviously they all died. So he also, or they were all infected and he ran away. We don't know, but they're gone. And he also says that he's from Baltimore QZ and that it's completely gone. So we know that QZ is completely been taken or overtaken by infected. Bill grabs a ladder and then lets the man up. Bill has a device to see if a person is infected, which Frank is like, where'd you get that?
Bill has his ways.
I'm like, why don't go get that thing? And he uses it on the man, and the man introduces himself as Frank, played by Murray Bartlett, and asks Bill for a meal. And Bill is reluctant, thinking if he allows everyone in, then or if he allows one wandering survivor to come in, then everybody's going to want to come in. But then Bill inevitably lets him stay. So I'll stop there. I really love this moment. What are your thoughts about the introduction of Frank? Because that's a key character that has been way deviated from the game.
Oh yeah, I was immediately excited to see like these first couple sentences because yeah, you get nothing in the game. Like you just know he's mad about something that happened in their relationship, their partnership that's got him irritated. But you get no lines from Frank and nothing. You don't know what go down. So I like this very intro of it. I love again, like I can't say enough about the traps and how prepared he is. That's just amazing that he has that whole thing around him where he's ready to go because you don't know what's out there. And I was curious at this moment too, besides figuring out he wasn't infected, but Bill being that guy he is, he likes to be a loner. He's very prepared. He doesn't really trust a lot of people. At that very instance, what gets him to say, okay, I'm going to give him a chance? He has a full conversation with him instead of being like, okay, I'm not going to tell you again. You need to get away from me. Go on about your business. Like keep going the direction you were going. So I was kind of interested from that point to see where it was going to go.
with with the show like this, there has to be some type of tension, and the tension of the game is not going to be the tension of what we see on the screen. And I feel like they had to give us some type of vulnerability for Bill, because Bill had it. He could have lived down there forever, you know but for the sake of suspension of reality, the only thing that can make a person like that vulnerable is love. What are you going to take away from him? Ain't nobody in the town. He's by himself. He clearly enjoys his own company. Must be a Sagittarius. you know he likes to be by himself, and it was the only way we were going to get something out of him other than bah humbug. So we needed that catalyst. And the way it was just so sweet. It was just so like, taking it back to Shrek. And ogres have layers. And he started
Like
had
onion.
Oh
he
yeah.
started unpeeling them layers one by love will make you vulnerable. And in the way that they did it, this was a whole full wow. Had his virginity taken. It was a whole thing. It was a whole thing. So yeah, he
Yeah.
that curmudgeon is a wrap now. He's in love.
Mhm.
For me in that way, yeah, this was such a gorgeously sweet episode. But in those opening moments, like I obviously got stuck on the last episode as far as the game. So I didn't even get this far. Never met Bill or Frank when I played the game.
Yeah, we remember where you got stuck.
Well, them clickers had me like messed up. I couldn't do it. But so yeah, so when he came out, I was like, all right. And it's interesting, like the analysis of a look, because Frank comes out and he's got kind of like this hungry look in his eye, but you don't know what it is until like a few frames later. You're like, oh, that's what it like. I started to like piece it. I was like, oh, okay, I think this is what's gonna happen. But in that moment, I'm like, he about to kill Bill and take the whole estate for
Kill
himself.
Bill.
I was like, oh my God, am I really gonna have to watch this? And then but then so they have like the whole discussion, and I'm like, don't do it, Bill. Don't do it. Bill, you can't trust these white people. Come on, don't do that, Bill. Don't do that.
Bill is white.
I know. This is a very conflicting episode for me.
Only one.
And so when he did, I was like, okay, again, like you said, he's got layers to be unraveled, which Frank did. He's got layers to be
All of them.
to
Did
be
he?
unraveled. And I like though that again, like everything was still earned. Like he kept his eye on him, he kept his hand on his gun. Like he stayed who he was every step of the way, right until that thing inside of him cracked open in the most vulnerable way.
Agreed. Yeah, I took the hunger for what it was. I really have no background on the show. I just knew it was a video game. So I took it as such a sexual tension. I was like, something going on here. And it was nice to see two comedic actors kind of take on a meatier, more dramatic role. I loved Murray Bartlett in The White Lotus. He was kind of an asshole. So it's nice to
Yes.
see
So
he
manager.
was just, a recovering drug addict, just super uptight a-hole. To see him kind of in like a sweet role was very nice. And then Nick Offerman, he's been in traditionally comedic roles, but he was kind of similar. And was it Parks and Rec? Like his character in Parks and Rec was kind of similar to Bill. If his character from Parks and Rec was put into this role, I feel like he would have been Bill. Like he's very like gruff and So in any case, I like this meet cute. You meet your boyfriend after he like aims a gun at you during an apocalypse, after he's trapped you in a manhole. Like it's super cute, telling your friends about it later. So I enjoyed it. And to reference the onion metaphor, yeah, it's nice to see the layers getting pulled down and build just kind of soften it up a little bit, and like hopefully the same is for Joel later on in the season. So that's all I got.
So for Raider X, the song at the end of the episode is Linda Ronstadt's "Long, Long Time," 1970. And we'll talk more about that. Actually, as a matter of fact, why don't I just go into it right now? Because that's what happens in the next scene. So Frank and Bill, they're seated to a meal, and Bill is an amazing cook, I might add. I wasn't even hungry, but then I started getting hungry looking at that meal on the table. I was like, damn, okay, rabbit did not look this good. And then after Frank finishes his meal, he goes over to Bill's piano and starts playing and singing out a key. And that's the Linda Ronstadt song that Raider X was asking about. So he starts playing, he's singing out a key. You want to plug your ears, like, okay, Frank, stop singing. He asks Bill to play a song on it and promises to leave. Bill sings that same song, but he sings it on key and plays the piano beautifully. And this is it was like a watershed moment, in my opinion, for the show, because this is where we see the walls of Bill breaking down. And you wouldn't expect a man with such a tough exterior to sing so beautifully and just so gracefully and delicately. And it's at that point that Frank unearths the softness of Bill. So Frank asks Bill, who is the girl that he's singing about? And Bill tells him, there is no girl. Ain't no girl. And then Frank gently, caresses his shoulder and says, I know, and places his hand on his shoulder, and then they kiss, embrace in a very romantic kiss. And this is the beginning of the love affair between these two. Frank asks Bill, go take a shower.
I know that's right. Wash that ass. Wash that ass. Please.
And they make passionate love. So I'm going to stop there because then there's a time jump. But what did you think about the courtship that happens between Frank and Bill? This beautiful melodic song that Bill plays on the piano, and then him opening up and they getting it on.
I'm glad Bill's game is a little bit better than Frank, because Frank can't sing. I was like, Lord, get him off of that piano. I didn't know what he was trying to accomplish. I was like, what is happening? When he started, because it was like taking away from the moment a little bit, but then with Bill got it back on track. So, but yeah, I thought it was interesting that they took us into this romantic moment when it's like, okay, there's no rules, nobody else, two of you guys. We forgetting about, the craziness. We not in the apocalypse for right now. And they could just have that nice little sweet romantic moment. So I like that they have that, representation always. Anytime you're going to throw that into like the sci-fi world, the supernatural world, it's always good to have that. And I'm just loving more backstory, because you get none of this. You get to figure out exactly, how both of them operates. You have two different dynamics. So yeah, he told him to go take a shower, so no games to be played. So that was the thing.
Period.
He said you better be ready. It was blunt. I like how he was blunt to the point. He was like, I don't have time for this.
I need that directness in my life. Please tell me what's up. Yes, say less. I love this sequence with them so much. I thought it was just so romantic. It really, really was romantic. Like it was sweet and it was tender and it felt really genuine. I thought it was cute. I really, really enjoyed their whole
So romantic. I love it.
arc. Like it was,
It really
you
was.
know, it was really one of the I really, really liked their whole interaction, how it was written, how they played it with each other. They have clearly these two performers have like a terrific amount of comfort with each other because it just felt very few things. I'm very, suspect of everything. Few things make me feel like a voyeur anymore. And it was just so nice to just be like, ooh, they are falling in love right in front of our face. And it was just so sweet. And I really like the whole thing was beautiful, but this scene in particular, their whole arc of how they began coupling was very, very nice. Very nicely done. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was definitely beautiful, and it's very poetic. I mean, I think in the dinner scene, there's like some stolen looks, and like Bill is like running his hand through his hair, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what this is. And then he gets over, and obviously, like, there's the piano swap, and he starts playing and singing. And this whole time, we've been focused on Bill and his softening, but this is also where we see Frank soften, like his survivor
Mhm.
shell falls away, and that tear comes down, and then he's just completely laid bare. And I think that's the poetry of love, right? Like, you can't, it sneaks up on you. It's not really, you don't really find it when you're looking for it, like the best loves, it sneaks up on you. But also with the whole, like, talk with mental health and being honest, like when you're vulnerable and open is when it happened. And I feel like they were both in that moment. Like, Frank dropped his shell and he's got the tears. And then Bill, for the first time since the whole thing had happened, was completely vulnerable. He was playing with his eyes closed. He had put himself in a place of complete trust with this
Mm.
person and was like, whatever happens, I'm surrendering myself to it. And then Frank hit him with them pimp lines. I was like, you also must have had black friends and listened to Marvin Gaye. All right.
Mm. I've
But
been
it
in
was just
time.
it was just so it was so poetic to me. I was like, this is gorgeous. And even the tender way in which Frank approached him in the bed, like, it wasn't like I'm a Jennifer
Mm.
Bones and just like rally your tooth feelings. Like, it wasn't that. It was like, what is your experience? And I feel like, adults now are having those conversations. Like, you got to have conversations with your partners. What do you like? What do you not like? What have you done? What scares you? All that type of stuff. And and he, again, they just kind of cradle each other's vulnerability in this really, really sweet way. But also maintain the sass, because Frank's like, also, I just want you to know, I ain't no hoe player. I don't just be smashing for lunch.
I'm gonna stay here for a few more days.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Frank, I feel it, man. You gotta let people know. I just out here just boning anybody in this pandemic. I do have a moral high ground.
Right.
So
Right.
Standards.
Your Uber is not here. I there's no Uber. What, like everyone else said, it's very sweet coupling. I think Bill would have been okay without Frank, right? I think Bill would have been doing his thing, doing his survival thing, alone, content with himself. Like you said, he's a sage, he likes to be by himself. He would have been great. But you never know what you're missing until you have it. So I think, this is where he was like, oh, love, this is what it's like. And we don't really know much about Bill's life beforehand. We know he was kind of like a survivalist, didn't trust the government, kept to himself. So I doubt he ever had an encounter with another man and was able to talk about his real feelings and be his true self. But now there's no one around, right? There's no one to judge. So he can let his guard down. And I think during that song and dance that they had at the end of dinner, that was his way of saying, of Frank telling Bill that it was okay. So I appreciated the fact that Bill finally got to be himself and finally got to express himself and be with someone that he actually wanted to be with. Although, like I said earlier, I do think he would have been perfectly content by himself. But now he has purpose. Now he has something to look forward to. Now it's just not like the day in the day out and just surviving. Now you're living. So I really enjoyed the beginning of their love story from the scene.
And I
Can you
really,
imagine what it was like living in that little ass town? First of all, you
You're
kind of lean
right.
to a survivalist anyway in this little picturesque town, and you have and you are gay or you're unsure
Yeah.
or you don't know in that little
Mhm,
ass town. I
mhm,
would have locked myself under in the basement too.
yeah,
Like get
yeah.
Agreed.
these narrow-minded people the hell up out of here.
I also
Agreed.
love this scene with Nick Offerman where he's with Murray Bartlett's character Frank, and he just looks like he's melting in his arms. Did you notice that where he's just completely? I don't know. He's just like, oh, I can't
I'm the
describe it.
little spoon. I'm the
Yeah,
little
he just,
spoon.
like I want to be hugged. I want to be caressed. Like he just melts. And we
Yeah.
saw this sort of tough guy exterior at the very beginning, and he completely transforms into this whole entire different person, really, in that moment between him and Frank. So I just loved seeing that moment as an actor, seeing Nick Offerman um, sort of, I don't know, unguard himself. I don't know if I'm using the right word, but just
Yeah.
break down those walls, as I had said before. Um, I want to address really quick in the comments. Alan and Bean said, I love the reshaping of Bill's storyline. So, quick reference to the game. In the game, Bill is actually gay. It's not anything that's like overtly stated, but he does mention Frank as his partner. So, that is canon. Team JVS says he was completely caught off guard. It's fascinating how much more deeper than went into this story than the game, which was primary letters off camera. Exactly. And in the game, and I'll talk about that more as we get towards the note, but the relationship between Bill and Frank in the game is way different than this beautiful love story that we see on the show. Alan and Bean in the game, they don't say how long they were together, but we know it was 10 years, really gave meat to the story. Yes, absolutely. Actually, they were together longer than 10 years. I think they were together for like 13 because they had that 3-year time gap between when they made love. And then we got to 3 years later, and then we got to another 10 years. And then Alan and Bean says, I meant reshaping as you didn't get the full story in the game. Oh, yeah. No, I totally, I'm actually just adding to what you said. Because Frank is basically non-existent in the game. We don't even know what Frank looks like. He's a corpse in the game. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're getting a whole reimagining with this character that Murray Bartlett played beautifully. So we move on to 3 years later in 2010, and Frank and Bill are in a very heated argument. And Frank wants to paint the house and mow the lawn and do the things that you do when you're living a very quiet suburban life. And Bill doesn't want to. He still wants to just stay a recluse. He doesn't want to rattle things. So Frank tells Bill he's been talking to a woman on the radio, and it's revealed that woman is Tess. We see Tess and Joel over Bill's home for a meal since Frank wants some community in his life, and Bill wants to remain, in solitude, basically. Tess and Frank go inside the house, which gives Bill and Joel some time to get alone and kind of get to know each other. I like it when they do those moments in the show. We had that last week where Tess went off, and then we had some alone time between Ellie and Joel. So now it's Joel and Bill's time to have that alone time. And Joel tells Bill that he has access to resources in the QZ that Bill doesn't have, and that he needs him and that they can help each other. Joel mentions Bill's fence and that, your fence has a short shelf life, bruh. And he can give him the tools to give it some more sustainability. And he warns him that although he's secluded from the infected, he's still vulnerable to raiders who can come quiet and armed through his property. And Bill just says to Joel, we'll be fine. So What are your thoughts about the exchange that happens here between Joel and Bill?
I just like that there was like a meeting of the minds. Like both these two skill set gentlemen kind of get to size each other up, like and really fill them out. Like, am I really supposed to trust you? Because Bill has his gun ready on the table, which I like that he's always prepared because you never know. But I like how Joel is like, look, you can get that gun out of my face because I understand. Let me tell you a little bit about your fence. You need to fix that. It's rusted on the side. I like how they're kind of like giving each other tips and kind of making that friendship. And you got Frank like on the side doing what he's doing, like chatting it up with Tess and taking her into the house and everything. And so I like how he's the opposite of Bill. Just keep pushing Bill out of his comfort zone. He wants to just stay recluse and in his own little zone, his apocalyptic prepared world. But it's like, no, we got this whole little town spread out a little bit and see what goes down. And by the way, before you get started, I got to take off, guys. It's getting a little late for me, but I appreciate it.
Oh, all right.
Ryan.
Bye, Ryan. Bye,
Bye,
Ryan.
Yeah.
Bye, Ryan.
I know. It's
I'm gonna
late
miss
for
the
you.
exciting
Sorry.
Boo.
So sorry.
know,
How
about
dare
that.
you be
I know.
responsible? What's wrong with you?
I know,
I
right?
got issues with responsibility. I ain't prepared
Yeah,
like
but
Bill. You know what I'm saying?
you got to get up way early though, so I feel it.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
All right. And before you
Bye.
start, Giandra, I want to also
Sure.
acknowledge, which a couple of folks in the comments have acknowledged, the passing of Annie Wershing, who played Tess in the game. She passed away from cancer today at the age of 45. So really sad, really tragic. And our thoughts are with her because it's just Tess is a very notable character. And the actress that played her, she's been in a lot of TV shows. She was in 24, Bosch. So she's got some pretty notable work, but it was just announced today. So yeah, just want to make that acknowledgement. Thank you guys in the comments for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. Love, it changes you. When you love someone, you start to take on some of their traits and they start to take on some of your traits, and you meet in the middle. And part of that is building community. Love is not just romantic love. You want to share it with other people, and it can be a lonely thing. It's just the two of you. It sounds ideal, but as we saw how they had it cracking, 3 years later, they sick of each other. We love you. I love you, but I'm sick of you. It's a thin line. We need some people up in here. We need some more people to talk to, because this cabin fever, even though we got a whole town, is too small. And that's just how you become vulnerable, and that's how the crack starts to happen in the wall and in the pipes, and the water starts leaking out. But I mean, it's a necessary evil. So I'm glad they introduced that into it, that you need community. We're human beings. We're meant to be companions to each other, and you know, like animals and tribe. We're groups. We're better when we're in groups and not separated from each other. So I like that touch.
Yeah, definitely. Not to retread, I think one of the things that stuck out to me when they had that whole argument, like obviously they have different uh, emotional needs, as far as like how they're responding to the trauma and the solitude. But what really stuck out to me is like they're going at it. And Bill just like takes a breath. He's like, okay, tell me why. And Frank's like, I already told you why. And Bill's like, okay. Like, but tell me again. And I don't know, like the older relationships like fascinate me the older I get, because it's like there's something to just like understanding, like being almost like on the same trampoline with someone, and sometimes you're bouncing and singing, sometimes you're off, and just like
Mm.
the way you interact with each other. I was like, that was like healthy without being destructive, because they could have, we know how relationships go. The pandemic devastated relationships.
Oh
So
yeah.
many people broke up during the pandemic, marriages, dating, and everything else. So they could have easily gone that route, but to give us like the touch of reality, and then also show, hey, here's how healthy people can deal with conflict. Like everything doesn't have to be a deal breaker. I love that. And then yeah, as far as Joel and Bill, I thought it was just interesting. Like again, kind of like the age factor coming into play, because at that point, obviously Joel's a lot younger, and he's so confident. Man, I got resources, doc. Like I got don't even worry about it. And Bill is like, yeah, but I've been here. I've seen a lot, done a lot. And then obviously, years later down the line, when Tess is, or not Tess, when Ellie's in the picture, now Joel has become a lot more similar to Bill. And it's like, well, we got to look out for us. We can't trust nobody. Everything's bad. Everything's terrible. It's all awful. And so like kind of seeing just like, and just again, Pedro Pascal can just freaking act. I was like,
Oh
yo,
yes.
he energy shifted so seamlessly. I was like, wait, what is this? Oh, he's
Get
like,
that gun out of my face.
yeah, right, yeah. Like full just like he was there with it. And then, then we go to the years later, he's like slumped again. I'm just like, just the physicality. This man just he just kills the physicality of acting so well.
Facts.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, I think if I were stuck with my boyfriend for a decade, or I think maybe 3 or 4 years at this point for them, I think I would want to paint the house. Like, there's only so much you can do. Let's mow the lawn, let's paint the house, let's redo the basement. Like, let's make this home of ours homier. So I don't understand why Bill was so against it. Like, what's it hurting for Frank to go up on the ladder and paint a little bit? He was just wants things his way. But to your point, Josh, when he was just like, all right, tell me why you need these things. What can I do to make you happy? And yeah, but I see Bill's side as far as letting people in. Like, you don't know these people. You don't know if they can be trusted. They could be raiders. They could come along for a couple days and end up getting infected, and then they're in our home, and next thing you know, now the two of us are in danger because Bill's the protector, so he has to think of all the possible scenarios, and to him it's not worth it. But at the same time, like, I can only be with you for so many days at a time. Like, I'm gonna get tired of you. So he let Joel and Tess through. He had to let them know, put the gun down. He had to let them know who's in charge. And yeah, like everyone said, I like that line, get that gun out of my face, because you're not gonna aim no gun at me while I'm trying to have a nice meal. So yeah, it was nice to see like domestic issues, domestic bliss all rolled into one episode, and what a relationship looks like during a zombie apocalypse, essentially. So.
And it looked like any other relationship. Like,
exactly. It didn't change.
Yeah.
Except for this next scene that you're about to get into. That's when it's a little, you're not dealing with that every day, but.
Well, I want to get to just one moment that I think changes the trajectory of both of these characters. And it was so beautiful, so wholesome. So it's a very short scene, and I want your take on all of this, all of your takes on this. So Frank shows Bill their garden, and Bill gives Frank gives Bill a ripe strawberry, and Bill bites into it and he giggles, and it's the most precious giggle. Like, Nick is devouring this roll, I'm just saying. Anyway, so it's
like them strawberries.
Yeah, but he's like giggling like a little schoolgirl, and it's just like hearing that from this man that's got this big buff exterior. He's got this beard, and he was kind of rough around the edges when we first meet him, and now he's having this really tender moment. So it's a beautiful moment that's shared between the two of joy and peace. And Bill tells Frank, I was never afraid before you showed up. So I just want, I'm just like, I need the tissues, man. This is just too much. So
that's going to be in my vows. That's going to be in my vows.
I know that's right.
So I want to discuss the impact of this scene on Bill's character development and the transformation of who he has become. So start with Giandra and move around.
Well, first of all, Tess and Joel was over there kicking it a lot. If Frank could get up in there, get one of his guns, and give his gun away without him noticing, because he's already, not trustful of outside people. So they got to be, that's given some insight before we get to it becomes full circle. They had a really, really, really good friendship, the four of them. Secondly, it's the little things. It's the little things. It's like using your own bathroom when you come home from work after being at work all day. It just it's the little things. And in this case, even in the midst of all this self-sustenance, there were still things they didn't have. And Frank was paying attention. He probably told him at some point, you know what would be dope with this rabbit? Some strawberry shortcake or something like that. And he remembered, and love make you remember dumb shit, and it's beautiful when it happens.
Yeah.
Not rabbit.
Yeah. No, so the strawberry scene, actually, it took me back. So in 2010, after the earthquakes hit Haiti, I went actually down with the recovery team. We are there for like 8 weeks. And so, we're there, we're living amongst, we're helping like rebuild and stuff. And obviously, not a lot in Haiti, especially at that time. And then one day, the orphanage we were staying at, someone came in and they had a box of red apples. And we were like, oh, we haven't had red apples in like almost 2 months. And it was just like, it was such like a moment, things we didn't even realize that we had missed. And so like some people, different people were just like, okay, I'm gonna eat my apple tomorrow. Can I get like a slice of yours today? And I give you a slice of mine tomorrow. Like it just created this bonding, and just the way they reacted to the strawberry, the way Bill did anyways, and just the thoughtfulness from Frank, that it took me back to that moment. I was like, I understand this. And then again, how it's paired. Like, there's so many poetry lines, like as the romance just goes. Because then he's like, I'm upset at myself for being older, and then Frank's like, older just means we're still here. I was like, oh, dang, all right,
killing me with these lines, boy.
right. And then Bill was like, you know what? Forget them strawberries. We can smash all that right now. You hit me with them.
Not on them though. Not on the strawberries. They almost.
And that was my thought. I was like, oh, you can't mess with the strawberries. And Frank's like, hey, let's just let us retire, shall we? But yeah, I understand that strawberry moment. And again, like you said, love makes you remember dumb stuff. Like it's just like, wow. And going back to what I was saying earlier, just like the moments of small joy that we take care of ourselves in the midst of the chaos of survival and existence. I planted a patch of strawberries because I know that you would enjoy that. Like it's so sweet.
Yeah. I liked also how Frank is conscious of their health. Like he's making Bill go on runs. Like if we gonna survive this apocalypse, you got to be in shape. Okay, you got to be able to run from fast zombies. So because that is actually the worst invention ever. When they came up with fast zombies, I was like, this is when I told myself I'm not gonna make it. Cause
yeah,
like that, the ones that just kind of shuffled, you could kind of, you can get away from those. But like y'all saw 28 Days Later when things was zooming, I was like, this is not for me.
No.
Peace out, world. So I appreciated that Frank was like, no, we're gonna stay in shape. We're gonna maintain our health. But to your point, JB, that giggle, it just warmed my heart because I've never heard a grown man giggle like that. Like he was like, I was like, what was that? Yeah, and then I suddenly wanted cold strawberries really bad at that point. So yeah, I appreciated the thoughtfulness. At this point, they've been together for a couple years. And like what you do to keep the relationship alive and keep it loving and keep it fun and exciting, and making out after your beloved gave you a strawberry, that's great. So they could easily hate each other at this point. And I did do a little bit of reading of the show today, so I knew that at some point in the video game that Frank and Bill parted ways. So to see that they're still going strong, they're still in little things for each other, they're giggling, I was all for it.
Absolutely. And it was so beautifully shot, where you just see the sun rising and this, on the horizon and all of that. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. So I love, as one of the commenters said, the reshaping of Bill and Frank's story and this adaptation. So as Joel has predicted, raiders do show up on Bill's property. Tracks are set off Gunshots are heard, and this actually awakens Frank in the middle of the night. He immediately looks for Bill, and Bill is outside with his rifle shooting at the raiders. Bill is shot by one of the raiders, and Frank comes to his rescue. And Bill tells Frank to call Joel and says that he'll take care of him. We then cut to the next scene, which is actually 10 years later. So 13-year gap now that these two have been together. And they still together. We still
rocking.
Still together.
we still together. And it's kind of, they kind of did a little bit of a gotcha with us, because in that last scene, Bill is shot by the raiders. He's bleeding out in his stomach. And, Frank, I'm going to pull up the image really quick as I am discussing this here. But yeah, there's Frank. He's pretty calm during the situation, but it's not looking good for Bill. But then we do end up going 10 years later, where we see both Bill and Frank together. So he did survive, but, ironically enough, Frank is actually in a wheelchair.
Right.
And he's also on medication, which Bill helps give him daily. Frank is tired, he's exhausted, and he tells Bill that today's my last day. I'm like, okay. And Frank has a terminal illness, we learn, and he just wants to end his life at this point. So he asks for one more good day, and he instructs what Bill should do, which includes going shopping, getting married, and having a last meal, and then crushing up all of his meds and then putting it into wine. And then he will fall asleep in Bill's arms. So what are your thoughts about Frank instructing Bill to take his own life, and even the events that led up to that, with the raiders showing up and we thinking that, this was the end for Bill, but ended up not being the case?
They were on Angelica's time. Like she said, I'm checking out. I'm taking my stuff and I'm going to sleep because I'm not dealing with all this. So it's poetic, and it's beautiful to be able to do it on your own terms, on your own time. They could have been got married, in that time span when they were arguing about painting the store and the furniture store and the wine store and all that. They could have got married at any of them times. They could have got married with Tess and Joel over there, because that's clearly their homies. They could have had some witnesses and everything, but it just took to have that private moment together to do things on their own terms is what was touching to me, because it was ultimately, it was about them and their little paradise, and taking the final voyage on their own terms, which is
The way to
which
go.
is sweet.
Very
It was
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is the moment where I started to lose the battle with the tears that had been like, it'd been like, here. I've been like, I got this. I'm good. And then this is when I started to lose. Because even with like the Raiders, it was like, yeah, he had the rigs and it was like the fire and stuff, but it's like Bill didn't even wake Frank up. It wasn't like, hey, let's us go get them. It's like, you sleep, I'm gonna go take care of this because you're my priority. You're like you said, Angelica, Bill's the protector. And I found that particularly moving. And then he wakes up and he's in the chair, whatever, and they have that whole conversation. And when they're on the couch, like what Frank's saying is extremely moving, but it's Bill's face. Like he's devastated, like listening. And then again, Frank probably had some of the best lines in the show. I think this might have been at the table later, but he's like, "Do you love me?" He's like, "Yes." Then love me the way I want you to. I was like,
I have to cry all over again.
"Jeez, man, jeez." So yeah, and it's just it was such a, I don't even want to say like a pure it was a good love story. And I like the distinction they made between like perfect and good, because Frank was really like, yeah, all the days with you haven't been great, but I've had more good days with you than I've had with anybody else. And I'm just like, yo, like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And it made me think like, and obviously this would be probably another 30-minute conversation, so we can't go into it, but just like, what would you do for your last good day?
Mhm.
I was like, I don't know. But like Frank knew. He's like, this is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna have our last moments together. But then the fact that he walked all the way out and then you're gonna take us up to our bed and then I'm gonna fall asleep in your arms. I was like, oh my god, Frank.
You
I
killed
can't
me,
handle
Frank.
it,
You
man.
killed
Don't
me.
do this, Frank.
So yeah, it was so much. So much.
Yeah. I was a little annoyed with Frank. Actually, we're gonna back up a scene because the reason why Bill got shot is because he was yelling at Frank to get in the house. So if Frank
That's
had
a
kept
fact.
his behind up in the house, Bill would have never gotten shot. So I was like, this ain't your jam. This ain't your thing. We all have one job. Your job was to stay safe in the house and let the real man take care of business. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm like, he don't listen. Like I see, I thought he was about to do something. I'm like, oh, he put the I don't know nothing about guns. He put the
Clip.
magazine in the clip.
There you go.
Yeah, he put the mask. I thought he was about to start doing some shooting. All he was doing was saying, Bill, what are you doing? Like, clearly he's trying to protect you. Get in the house. So I just wanted to put that out there. Frank got Bill shot.
Mhm. Right.
Right.
You ain't lying. You ain't lying.
Right. And I did appreciate Bill had his whole list of things. Like I got instructions, I got copies of keys, reach out to Joel, he'll take care of you. He had a whole plan set up because clearly he knew he was gonna go before Frank. And then I knew it was a fake out though, when he was just like, okay, go to Joel, and then his eyes kind of like he almost died, like he died with his eyes open, but then it cut to black. And we see, ironically, like you said, Frank is the one in the wheelchair. He's the one that ended up, getting sick. And I don't know if this is like a cliche, but I love when people get older and they start to paint. Like I just feel like that's like a thing that you have to do. You get old and you get run down, you start to paint. So I liked seeing all like the artwork, and obviously Bill was a subject for Frank and all the different ways that he painted him. That was cute for me. And yeah, they just seemed like a nice older, married couple, even though they weren't technically married at that point. That were just living their life and doing the best that they can. And you almost forget that they're kind of in the middle of this apocalypse. And yeah, it was, Frank had enough, and he said it's time to go. And, I love that he did all the things that he loved to do with Bill, and he planned his whole day out, and you just hold on to that moment. And it kind of reminds me of a scene from Artificial Intelligence, when David is with his mom finally at the end of the movie, and the aliens give him his mom. They're like, but you only have one day with her, and they just do all the things they love to do together. So I kind of have an idea of what I'd want to do if I chose my last day, or if I knew it would be my last day. It's just all the comforting things that just make you warm inside. And then he does what Frank told him to do. He crushes up his pills and put it in his wine after a wonderful Bill meal. And then, Bill had a little trick up his sleeve, but I'm sure you'll get into that, Jamie.
Yes, Bill and Frank, they spend their last day together. He pours the drug mixture into the wine, as you stated, and Frank drinks. However, what Frank doesn't know is that Bill consumed that same mixture.
Ha ha ha.
Ha ha ha, I got you. So tonight, both Frank and Bill plan to die. And although Frank doesn't support Bill's gesture, he does find it to be incredibly romantic. And Bill takes Frank to bed. The next scene is with Joel and Ellie. And some time has passed. They are headed to Bill's property, and Joel calls out for Bill and Frank. And we notice that time has passed because we see mold growing on their leftover meal the night that they had consumed the drug mixture. So some time has gone by since that incident. And Joel is about to open the bedroom door, which is where both Joel and, where both Frank and Bill are now deceased. So he's about to open the bedroom door, and then the front door blows open, and then it closes, which I'd like to know what your thoughts are about.
I'll wait. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Well, let me finish this and you guys can jump in. But Ellie has picked up an envelope with a key, and she opens it, and then Ellie reads a suicide note from Bill to Joel. Ellie reads the note. Bill reveals that before Frank, he had hated the world and everyone in it. Then he saved someone and protected them. And then he tells Joel that they are the same and that they have a job to do and let no one stand in their way. Very profound line, by the way. Um, Ellie stops reading the note all of a sudden. And then Joel's like, okay. And then he grabs the note. And then we see why she stopped reading it, because in the note it says, keep Tess safe. Joel finishes reading the note outside, and he has his little moment, his private moment, and now he's got a new motive for keeping Ellie safe. So now I'll let you guys go here for commentary. I do want to add one thing here about the note and how it relates to the game. There is an actual suicide note from Frank in the game. The note in the game is definitely not as nice as it is on the show, but Frank does leave a letter to Bill, and it's kind of mean spirited. It's very detached. He said that he had hated his guts and that he wanted more from life than Bill could ever give. So
Oh,
I'm almost kind of curious to know what that backstory was about.
That was mean.
Yeah, to
Mhm.
know, he did that. So just wanted to add that. But either way, the game does align with the rest of the story going from this point on, and we'll get into that more later. But let's stop for this. And Angelica, if you want to start first, go right
Oh,
ahead.
sure. So I know it's kind of a tradition in a lot of cultures when someone passes that you open a window to let their soul out or open the door. So I think when Joel arrived, being that he's close friends with Frank and Bill, that was, when the door opened, that was their souls leaving, right?
Mm.
So that
That's
was
what I
pretty
gathered.
yeah, that was pretty profound to me. And I think they actually barricaded the door. So that's why Joel couldn't get in, because they kind of wanted their, almost like their tomb. They didn't want it like consecrated. They wanted that to be sacred for them. So that's where they left it. So I thought that was very sweet. And I loved the scene before when Bill revealed that he had spiked his own drink, and Frank was like, I don't approve of this. I should not be signing off on this, but I'm glad. I'm glad that you did it. And Bill was like, look, I'm old. I live my life. I've served my purpose, which is taking care of you. So you're not going to be here. I'm not going to be here either. And my parents say it all the time. My dad says, if you go, I'm jumping in after you. So,
Yeah.
so that seems to be commonplace for a couple. And I love the letter. I love how Bill was like, I don't really like you that much, Joel, but I guess we're friends. And protect Tess, which that's when that kind of hurt a little bit. And I know when Joel saw that and he read the letter, he went outside to take a moment. I think that was the first time that he grieved for Tess. Up until this point, he kind of had it all pent up. And like you said, he had a new motivation now. Now he has to take care of Ellie. So this is probably where we see him turn the corner, and he's done being so grumpy and crotchety around Ellie, and he's going to open up a little bit. And I also love the scene where Ellie gets into the car, because I didn't realize that Ellie had never been inside of a vehicle her entire life. She said it was like a spaceship. So just that whole experience for her, and seeing her experience the world around her, it kind of reminds me of like Rapunzel and Tangled, like, best day ever, everything is amazing. So I really like that. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Giandra.
For with Joel reacting to that part about Tess, I think it was just, it makes me think back again, like I said in the beginning, like they really kicked it. Like they were really homies. And when you have a wake for somebody, you don't wake alone. You wake with a community of people. And these are like the only people left who really, really knew her, because, they weren't all about ammunition and strategy. I mean, to an extent, but they were community. They ate together and probably played some parcheesi, and went to the little wine store, and they kicked it, and they were homies, and they were a crew. And his whole crew now is wiped out, like his friends. not the people he's getting money with or trying to survive with, but his friends where he could let his barriers down. And it just, this whole half of the show was just so, I just, a lot of tears were shed. It was just so sad and just sweet. And uh, that's all I have to say because I don't want to get all weepy.
Yeah, it was a lot of emotions. Yeah, even when I mean, I had a feeling that he was gonna like kill himself as well. Just he was too calm. Like he was just too calm. I was like,
Mm,
oh, you also about to go. But even just like what he said, he was like, I'm satisfied. And I don't know if it's my church background, but just the whole idea of having ran your race well, and just like, yeah, I did everything that I'm supposed to do. Like I'm good. I'm good. That resonated, and I also love the fact that true to like I just love art. Like again, like with the door and like them walk them lead the spirits leaving, and like Bill didn't want Joel to open the door and see their bodies, and the viewers we never saw their bodies. Like I loved that even when they pan into the room, it stops at the flowers and the painting, and we never see them. Even when he wills him in there, like that's where the scene kind of like cuts. I was like, this is just it's beautiful, and it I don't know, even though obviously they die, um like who's it was, I think it was Bill who said, he's like, this is not the tragic suicide at the end of the play. And even though it was a double suicide, they still found a way to kind of make it like palatable and sweet and something like that evokes positive feelings. And I just thought that was like, like this is just phenomenal. And it being, you know, the type of love story that it was in the society that we exist in, I'm always leery these days, because usually people use representation, whether it's POC or LGBT or anything, as like just something to put out to like, hey, we did this thing, like like the black square phase. And
hmm
this whole thing was just so beautiful. I was just like, I mean, the other side of me is like, wow, I never thought two white men would be my ideal love relationship.
Oh, white
Doing
men at
that,
that.
I was like, oh, wow, this is actually.
I would love a relationship like Bill and Frank's. I really
I'm
would.
Yes,
saying,
me too.
Grow me some
That's
strawberries, damn
relationship
it.
goals. Yes.
I'm saying,
Hashtag relationship goals.
right? Just would have never guessed that. But yeah, it was all beautiful. And I think down to again turned to like Joel turning the corner. I feel like Ellie turns the corner as well, because as we said at the beginning, she had been relentless with Joel, but in that moment when she reads the letter, she stops. It's like the first time she's ever really like soft with him, and then everyone else talked about what happened afterwards. But I was just like, I don't. It's always iffy when you have like your crescendo moment, which is obviously the double suicide. It's like, where do you go from there? How do you close this out? And I'm just like, they just gently landed this plane in the most beautiful, fulfilling way. So yeah.
That's a good observation there, Josh, about how she stops when she reads the letter, because she's obedient in that moment. 'Cause throughout the episodes too, Joel was saying, don't mention Tess's name. So she actually did what he told her to do by not saying her name, even though it's in the letter. I absolutely just love the way they did this in comparison to the game, because I do like the fact that you mentioned we don't see their bodies. We do see Frank's body. He's basically hanging. He kills himself by hanging, and the reason is because he got infected and he just doesn't want to, you know, develop into the infected. So he decides to off himself before that mutation grows into his body. But this was just a more poetic and handled with grace and care and love, the way they handled Frank's suicide. And Frank got a fully developed, fully fleshed out story. And I absolutely love how they turn in this direction. And I keep saying this, and I'll say this over and over again, that The Last of Us is not a story about zombies. This is not a zombie
Mm.
show.
Mm-hmm.
Zombies are in it, and the zombie element will keep us entertained to some extent, but it really at the end of the day is about finding hope and peace and love in a world that's completely devoid of it.
Mhm.
So that's what I get as the core of what this whole entire narrative is about.
Can I go down the rabbit hole a little bit for Praise the Lord, The Last of Us watchers, since Josh and Angelica, you both mentioned like religious elements or things that you took from it in the show. I had the same kind of thoughts too, for a couple of different things. Like in the early scene, when going, just real briefly with the evacuation of the town and the people didn't make it to the QZ, it kind of reminded me of the Nativity and not finding a place where you to take your baby and thinking
Mhm.
about the Virgin Mary. So I was thinking about that and just the way that they exited the town. They didn't tell us why they were exiting. Were the infected in there? It made me think of
Moses.
Yes.
Passover. It's giving me the Passover themes. And then just with Frank and Bill, it's almost in the end, like with the crucifixion, and it's finished. They can go now because they've done all they're supposed to do on this earth. Because so praise the Lord, The Last of Us watchers, we got you, we see it. We see it.
Yes.
So good.
And I had one tidbit. I noticed that this entire time Ellie has wanted a gun, and Joel has been like, no, 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 you can't have a gun. And she sure enough found a gun in a drawer and snuck it in her bag. So I'm sure that will play itself out later on in
Yeah.
the season. But I was like, that Ellie don't listen. He said
Not
follow
listening
everything
now.
I said to do. Now she listened about Tess, but she was like, I'm gonna get me a gun. So Ellie going to Ellie.
Ellie gonna
And
get her a cat.
indeed. So yeah, I'm actually about to talk about that. So Joel asks
Okay.
Ellie to show her arm and sees that she's not infected still. And Ellie is about to bring up Tess again, and Joel stops her, as we've discussed. Joel sets ground rules, though, for Ellie that she needs to follow if she's traveling with him. 1, do not bring up Tess. 2, do not tell anyone about your condition. And 3, do what I say when I say it. And the reason why I'm quoting this exactly the way it is on the show is because those words in that dialogue is exactly said by Joel in the game. So the gamers probably got a little excited when they heard that from Joel. So then Ellie sees a handgun in a drawer and she hides it in her backpack. So Ellie's going to Ellie. And Joel takes Bill's truck and both head out. Ellie finds a cassette tape, and guess who it is? It's Linda Ronstadt, and it's the song that we heard played by Bill and Frank and the piano in the earlier scenes. The final shot is that point of view that Josh mentions of Bill and Frank's bedroom looking out as the music plays off. And it's just a beautiful bookend to the episode with that song. So that's the way it ends. And yeah, what is your thoughts about the end of that scene as well as the end of, or this entire episode as a whole?
Frank is the sweetest, most courteous person ever. He thinks of everything. His attention to detail is everything. And it's like he waited his whole life to have someone to share that quality with, that probably could tolerate it, that could handle it, who would relish it, like pouring water on a dry plant and just watching it come to life. And just even that, we left the window open for you so the house wouldn't stink. Like, here's the keys in the note because we know you're going to come eventually. Just the thoughtfulness of it all. Even that was touching. Like, even in the midst of all your suffering, you're still thinking about the homies. Like, they're probably going to show up at some point. So I'm going to make sure everything is arranged so they can just get what they need and go, because they probably gave us what we needed. So I'm gonna set it up so they're good. Ugh, we all need us a Bill and a Frank, like for
Yes.
real.
Facts.
Say that. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very fitting. Like we said, Ellie, Ellie's gonna Ellie. Although if she hasn't been in like a truck or a plane before, I'm like, has she ever even used a gun? So
In the QZ, she probably has in the QZ because they have guns.
I forget. Yeah,
For
she
her
was raised
sake,
there.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm like, you really out here, girl, just wilding. But yeah, it was just everything about it was so thoughtful. And well, now my Bible brain is in full gear. So I mean, it makes me think. So then there's like a brief story that Jesus tells about like a man who goes and finds a field and finds a pearl in the field. So he buys the whole field so he can get the pearl, which is of like obviously the immense value. And to me, I was like, oh, that's what Frank did. Frank was going somewhere. He had a destination, and he took on this greater expense of getting away from his destination, the people he probably knew were there, to just have this thing that he valued even more. And I'm like, that's beautiful. And I realized we completely skated over that it was Tess and Frank who came up with the code. I was like, they dropped that in like so suddenly. I was like, oh, that was a nice way to do it, because they have played them as like the useless ones of the bunch, like stuff. But it wasn't Bill and Joel who came up with the code. It was Tess and Frank. I'm like, that also was beautiful. Again, they built the friendship in that short time that was just so strong. But yeah, the how it ended. Yeah, he got the car, he got the battery. Obviously, he had that moment of like, Jesus Christ, I got this truck again. There's no freaking battery. I could see it like in his face, and he opens the fridge and he does the whole thing. But yeah, I just felt like, and then the song is playing. He's like, wait. Okay, don't change it. Don't change it.
I like this song.
And yeah, and again, I feel like again everything's earned. It's not too much. He's not being too soft. He's not being too sappy. It's just like, okay, this is where we're at. We laid the ground rules. I'm pretty sure you're not going to follow the ground rules, because even when he saying back to me, she's like, we just got to do what you say. I was like, see, you're just hard-headed for no reason. That was unnecessary. But yeah, and then just the flowers and the painting, which I just felt was emblematic of how Frank was and how Bill grew to be, which is like, we just choose to focus on the moments of beauty and joy, and that's what makes a life. So yeah, it was a lot of tears.
Well, lots to talk about. Yeah, I mean, who would have thought a show that involves zombies and survival would involve such a beautiful love story? So, Frank and Bill, they're up there with like The Notebook and Jasmine and Aladdin and all the great love stories. We got Bill and Frank. I love episodes like this. I mean, I wouldn't call it exactly a bottle episode, because we kind of have a bookend of Ellie and Joel. But just the fact that we spent most of the episode with Bill and Frank, I love that. It's just very intimate, and it's almost like you get to peek into, like, you're the fly on the wall on this beautiful love story developing. It got me all warm and fuzzy. That's not what you expect from a show like this. So many quiet, tender moments. So I really enjoyed it. And ultimately they had a role to play, right? Because they represented another loss for Joel, and kind of gave him motivation to keep going, to kind of open up his self to Ellie. Also, he needed a ride. He needed some ammunition. So it all worked out, It all worked out beautifully. So I really enjoyed it. I could probably watch, Bill and Frank forever. Just have like a spin-off series for the last 13 years that they were together. I'd probably watch that all day. And like I said, it was really nice seeing Murray in a sweet role. He was kind of he deserved to get offed in The White Lotus. So it was kind of nice seeing, he was like kind of like an aggressive and predatory and just very manipulative, and then you see this sweet, kind-hearted, just gentle soul that just wants to paint his front porch and mow the lawn and just be with the man that he loves. So it was very nice. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I would say out of the 3 episodes so far, this is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, easily.
Absolutely.
Two more things. Joel knew them so good when they pulled up he noticed that Frank's flowers was dead.
Yes.
You got to know some people to know
Right.
that. Like, what's up with the flowers? Why are these flowers dead? So that's the first indicator.
Right.
And I
Frank
know
would
it's not
never.
part of the game. It's like, why didn't they just stay there? I would have stayed in. I would have been like, y'all
Me
got
too.
houses. I would have just stayed there. But that's not part of the game. So
Right. Well, listen, I think that this is by far one of the best episodes of the season. I absolutely love the way they fleshed out Bill's character. Bill in the game, his only purpose is to be a resource for the vehicle. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh,
they
wow.
they go to Bill, they get the car, and then we don't see Bill ever again in the game. We don't know if his fate is death after that or if he's still alive.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's the only purpose he serves. So to see that not only does he serve the purpose of providing the vehicle for Ellie and Joel's journey, but he also serves a greater purpose in confirming for Joel that Ellie is someone that he needs to protect, that Ellie is his anchor in this story. And I think that that's some beautiful context to add to why obviously Joel is going to be more of this father figure in Ellie's life. So Bill was that conduit. And I think that they explain that beautifully in this episode. So I've seen some mixed responses on Twitter. I've been looking at the temperature, engaging it to see. I know, right? Yeah, like shocker. People are upset.
That made me sad. When I finished it, I was like, this is so gorgeous and award worthy. And I was like, and I know exactly the people who are going to come after this episode. Like, they're going to miss everything.
Yeah. And some of the people were saying like it was boring and all of this. And it's like, if you understand really great writing, and when it comes to things like building a story, adding layers, understanding the motivation of why a character does what he does, this makes sense. You need to add this in there. Right. And the game, you're not going to get that, because the game, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about action, and you want to keep, you do want to make the attention levels just a little bit less than you would in the TV format, because you want to keep folks engaged with the game. So it's always going to be different. But I thought they executed it perfectly.
Right. And we all know that if Frank had been some pretty little hot thing, then there wouldn't be no complaints. We already know that.
But would it be as touching and warm? Like, would it really warm your heart if it was? I don't think so.
No, when I saw it happening, I was like, you know what? If Frank would have been just like the typical like white woman, I said I would have checked out, because I
wouldn't have been invested.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
It would have been a same old tired trope of, I am man, I gotta go outside and protect the Ponderosa, you know. And this guy and the best part about it is a lot of the canon came from the game. So
yeah.
Right,
and the guys that did the game, they're not afraid to go there when it comes to diverse relationships, and we'll learn about that later on, and also in season 2 when it comes to The Last of Us 2. So yeah, I thought that this was absolutely brilliant. I love it. I hope Nick Offerman gets some kind of awards consideration, because he devoured and annihilated this role. And
for the giggle alone,
and when he just kind of cowers when Frank, kind of opens up to him, and he just cowers, like, that was just such a sweet moment. So yeah.
Ironically, I felt how I was when I watched Boba Fett, and then Mando showed up. Completely forgot it was Boba Fett's show, because Mandalorian was there. I was like, oh yeah, this is The Last of Us. This is actually about Joel and Ellie. I completely just zoned that out.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate for those of you that have left comments and engaged with us. Thank you for participating in this. As I stated, we won't have a show next week, but we'll resume the week after. And if you did happen to sign in and you hear spoilers, know that this is a recap. There's going to be spoilers because it's a recap show. So don't tune into the show if you haven't watched the episode yet. You can catch it after. This show is available for viewing after we are done live, and you can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on our Facebook page, and you can also watch it on Twitch. But yeah, if you want to join us live, make sure that you have seen the show, because obviously we're recapping what just happened. I just wanted to put that out there
for the people in the back.
For the people in the back.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that first, Michelle. So thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.